An aspiring young rapper vanishes without a trace.
He had went to a friend's house, and that was the last time that she saw him.
I was posting on Facebook and telling everybody that my brother was missing.
His criminal record, but when an informant comes forward, the case takes a different turn.
I asked, what can you tell me? And it was an information bomb. He's been shot 4 times. At least one of those shots was in the back.
I kind of was numb when I heard about it.
Her rage was building over the course of those hours.
I think something just kind of broke inside her mind.
She killed him, disposed of him, and then helped everybody look for his body. That's just next level evil.
It's December 22nd, 2021 in Columbia, South Carolina. While most residents are getting ready for Christmas, 29-year-old Taylor Wardlaw is on the phone to police about her missing boyfriend, Terrell Sims.
We got the call from Taylor Wardlaw that Terrell had gone missing. She said that he had last been seen 2 days prior at her house, where they lived together.
Taylor says she's just now calling because she initially wasn't worried. Terrell often leaves with his friends for days at a time.
He had gone back home from a friend's house. Taylor said that Terrell left around, 6 or 7 in the morning, and she says that's the last time that she saw him. Taylor says that their relationship is not perfect, but they're in love and they don't really have problems. Taylor suggested that Terrell kind of lived by his own rules. So for him to be gone for 1 day wouldn't necessarily cause too much alarm with her. The unusual part is that he wasn't contacting anybody. He wasn't answering the phone.
Now, she's afraid something might be wrong.
You could tell that she seemed to be in distress, worried.
Missing person reports are considered high priority. The Special Victims Unit investigators began looking into the case.
At the initial start of a missing persons investigation, our Special Victims Unit would check hospitals. We'll start talking with their friends, what kind of history they have, anything that gives us a pattern of life or background into who they are.
Terrell Davon Sims was born July 6, 1995 in Columbia, South Carolina. 5 minutes later, he was followed by his twin sister, Marcella.
Terrell and Marcella never stayed in the crib. They always found a way out of the crib. I'm trying to get to Terrell, and Marcella done went this way. So, I was like, they twins.
But their family would face tragedy early on.
Terrell and Marcella were babies when our mom passed. I had just turned 10, and she was in the hospital ever since Thanksgiving. I think it was December the 18th, 1995, when she passed.
When the twins were just 4 years old, their father died as well, making them and their older sister Rose orphans.
Growing up, I had a lot of responsibilities with Terrell and Marcella. I would try to help out as much as I could.
Though their childhood was not easy, the siblings took solace in each other.
Terrell used to cheer me up because I was more softer and he was a little bit more tougher. He would always make me laugh and lift me up.
As a teenager, Terrell's skill at making others laugh served him well in school.
He was like one of those type of students that like to make people laugh in the classroom. Always getting in trouble. Terrell was a class clown.
Terrell's natural charm made him popular with the women in his life as well.
He was a ladies' man. He was loving, sweet, funny, and he would date different girls, and that's just how he was.
When I met Terrell Sims, I'd seen this boy running around in the neighborhood with no shirt on, and he just drew my attention. He was so polite. I told him my name, and I told him that I liked him, and ever since then, we was unstoppable.
When his aunt's health began to fail, Terrell dropped out of school to care for her.
She needed him, so he didn't turn his back on her. Anything that she needed, he was right there.
After his aunt died in 2016, Terrell left home to start a life for himself. He found an apartment in the Columbia Section 8 housing development known as the Colonies.
It's for the low-income people. They help you and stuff like that.
Terrell did work at the hibachi restaurant. He would talk about the things that he would do, like wash dishes and stuff and clean up.
Terrell did what he needed to make ends meet, but his true passion lay in music.
Terrell loved to come up with different rhymes, and he would always try to get me to listen to it. Terrell could sing. He used to always sing during church and all types of stuff.
He was good. Terrell just loved music.
Being a musician helped his image as a ladies' man as well. By the time he was 23, Terrell had fathered 3 children.
Terrell had different baby moms, different children. He would feed them, cook for them, take care of them.
Terrell loved all his kids, but Terrell just wasn't ready to settle down. Terrell didn't find that special one.
In 2018, Terrell seemed to finally meet his match, a single mother named Taylor Wardlaw.
She moved from New York to the Colonies. Terrell, one day, him and his homeboy was walking down the block, and he seen Taylor and the other girl, and he drew attention to Taylor, and then they was talking ever since.
Taylor, she grew up in the Bronx, and she came from a good home. She was just family-oriented. When I first met Taylor, she just always wanted to be like an entrepreneur. You know, my son with Taylor was born June 2014. We was just taking care of him as like a whole, co-parenting, everything.
When that relationship
Took care of him. Terrell would brag about how she could cook all the time.
I felt like Taylor was a step up for him. He was doing a little better with her. He started to really want for himself more.
In 2020, they had a child together. And though neither were first-time parents, they were overjoyed to start their own family. After dating for 2 years, it seemed Terrell wanted to be more than just a father.
That's when Terrell moved in with Taylor. Taylor would go to work in the morning and Terrell would stay home and watch the kids. And then Terrell would go to work at the hibachi restaurant. And then Taylor would take the kids.
Taylor, she wanted to be the person that he spent the rest of his life with. My first impression of her as I got to know her, it was like, oh, she's stuck on him.
They had just moved into a new house together. They had this new baby together. So they seemed like they were moving in the right direction.
Now, just 3 days before Christmas, Terrell is missing, and no one seems to know where he is.
That ain't like Terrell. No matter where Terrell is, Terrell always lets somebody know where he at.
Taylor doesn't know exactly how he left the house. He had been dropped off by a friend, and she's not sure if a friend picked him up.
But according to Taylor, there might be a good reason why Terrell isn't talking to anyone. It seems their once perfect relationship had recently taken a turn for the worse.
She said that Terrell was on bond for domestic violence.
He had previously gotten out of jail a few months prior to going missing. Terrell and Taylor had, at times, a tumultuous relationship. At that point, she's worried that he may have gotten up and left town.
Coming up, a look into Terrell's life hints at unspoken tensions.
We got the idea that Terrell wanted to find a way out.
And a new witness comes forward with disturbing allegations.
Taylor said that Terrell had come home late and they got into some sort of argument.
"48 hours after the last known sighting of Terrell Sims, investigators respond in person to learn more information from his girlfriend, Taylor Wardlaw. Taylor tells investigators that she and Terrell had a tumultuous history, and about 18 months ago, it turned violent.
Police reports indicated that the summer of 2020, Taylor called the police to report a domestic violence event. She relayed to them that he had put a gun to her 9-month pregnant belly, threatened her life.
There was nothing other than the statement to corroborate what happened. This was a he said, she said kind of situation. Ultimately, he was arrested because they did develop probable cause.
Terrell had a few misdemeanors, but the charge of domestic violence seemed like a large step from his other charges.
Records show Terrell sat in jail for almost a year before posting bail, missing the birth of their child. He was released 4 months prior in August of 2021, but is currently facing charges of domestic violence of an aggravated nature.
And he had an ankle monitor. In this case, there's an exclusion zone that's set, and people that are on ankle monitor, they cannot go within 1,000 feet of the victim's address.
There was a strict no contact provision in his bond, so he was not supposed to be in contact with Taylor, certainly not living with her. And of course, he was.
Taylor never updated her address with the ankle monitor company, so that was how they circumvented being able to maintain the relationship after he bonded out.
To investigators, avoiding being caught violating the terms of his bond seems like a compelling reason for Terrell to disappear. The question is, why he hasn't contacted Taylor or his family.
We found out that Taylor was actually the one that posted the bond for Terrell back in August.
She stayed in contact with him the entire time he was in jail.
Taylor was actually trying to get the case tossed out. She even told us specifically that facts were wrong, it was a mistake.
She said that she did not feel threatened by him and that she wanted him back in the home so he could be a dad to their newborn.
When those domestic violence things started coming up, I was surprised because he never bruised at me, and we've been together a long time.
Terrell wouldn't pull no gun out on Taylor. He wouldn't do that.
According to Taylor, she and Terrell had been trying to patch things up. On December 20th, authorities received a call from the ankle monitoring company, but it wasn't a top priority for them.
It's just an automatic notification to our office, but police had no information about whether he was involved in any sort of altercation or arguments with anybody else.
Per protocol, Terrell's listed contacts were also notified.
My cousin called me and told me that they called her about the ankle monitor being temporary, being cut off. So I got on the phone and I called Taylor.
Taylor was already aware that his ankle monitor had been cut off, and she knew the last point of the ping, the 6600 block of Monticello Road. That area of Monticello Road is pretty rural, spaced out. There's a lot of big properties, a lot of woods, a lot of creeks, a lot of streams.
Taylor tells officers she got the notification 48 hours ago on the 20th, which means by now, Terrell could be anywhere. Columbia police put out a statewide alert for other agencies to be on the lookout.
At the time, we're dealing with COVID. People are calling out of work. So we're having to work on modified schedules.
Since police don't have the resources for a manhunt, Terrell's sisters take matters into their own hands.
I was posting on Facebook and telling everybody that my brother was missing.
With Terrell missing for 48 hours, Taylor takes to social media to organize a search of her own.
Normally when a person go missing, you be like, okay, let's get together as a family and let's find him. It was none of that.
Taylor had posted on Facebook as well that she was organizing a search party for Terrell, and it was around the area of Monticello Road because that was his last known location.
On December 28th, the social media blitz seems to pay off.
In the middle of the night, Columbia Police Department got an unexpected visitor at headquarters who wanted to speak with an investigator. She said that she might have some information regarding Terrell's whereabouts.
She says he's in fact dead, and she knows who did it.
Over a week after Terrell Sims' disappearance, a mysterious informant comes forward alleging that Terrell is dead. The case is immediately reassigned to Sergeant Mitch Henry with the Violent Crime Unit.
I sat her down, and I always start my interviews very open-ended. What can you tell me? And it was an information bomb. The first thing that she tells me is that Taylor, who is a friend to her, as well as a male that she knew by the name Youngsta, came to her house pretty late that night.
She says they sat in her car talking for a while. Then, Taylor suddenly made a startling confession.
Taylor told her, I did it. I killed Terrell. The witness says that Taylor said that he had come home late and they got into some sort of argument.
She thought that he was cheating on her. Taylor told her that he had hit her. And so she said she shot him. She had shot him 4 times, but one of them missed.
At the time, Taylor's car was in the shop. She had a rental car. And she said that one of these bullets actually went through the siding of the house outside and struck the front hood of her rental vehicle.
According to the witness, Youngsta helped Taylor get rid of the evidence.
The witness didn't get the impression that he had anything to do with the killing, but did help Taylor move the body.
Youngster tells Taylor, I know a spot where we can dump him. So as they're driving out there, it's a good 30, 40 minutes from Terrell and Taylor's home. They remove the ankle monitor from Terrell's leg and toss it out a window.
Taylor told her that they dumped the body off of an embankment in a small creek off of Monticello Road.
With the increased media attention, Taylor is desperate to go back and make sure her tracks are covered.
According to the witness, Taylor asked her to help move the body to a different location, which the witness was refusing to do.
The witness told us the area that the ankle monitor presumably would be, which is an area near Crane Creek.
The witness says they then went their separate ways, but Taylor and Youngsta left something behind.
They both accidentally left their cell phones in the car. That's why she just showed up in the middle of the night, because she didn't want to be involved. So she gave them to us.
Without knowing the involvement of these phones, we decided to collect them as evidence and send them off for forensic processing.
While search teams comb the area around the creek looking for Terrell's body, Sergeant Henry digs further into Taylor's background.
She grew up in the Bronx. The Bronx is gritty. The Bronx is violent. She got into trouble. She grew up fighting. She always had that hostility in her.
Taylor, she didn't have any arrests, but she did own a gun. She had a concealed weapons permit.
We looked through pawn shop databases and just to see if any transactions had been made. And the day that Terrell supposedly went missing, Taylor had actually gone and pawned his grill. You haven't seen him, you're starting to get worried that he might be missing, but you're out here selling one of his favorite pieces of jewelry.
When detectives ask Terrell's loved ones what they think of his relationship with Taylor, they're less than complimentary.
Terrell's sisters kind of painted Taylor as very controlling.
Terrell was never the type of person to be with one woman, and Taylor knew that.
Taylor would do different things as far as tracking, monitoring his calls. She would do a lot of stuff to keep tabs on him. Like, he couldn't do nothing without her knowing.
Terrell been trying to end the relationships with her for a while. And I don't think Taylor could accept the fact that Terrell didn't want to be with her anymore.
We knew who the suspect was. We were in communication with Taylor. We just had to prove that it was her.
As Sergeant Henry wraps up his interviews, he gets a call from the search team. They haven't found Terrell's body yet, but they have found something else.
They were able to locate this ankle monitor about a mile up from the creek. It gave a lot more credibility to our witnesses' statement, and we were able to actually pull some data off of that device.
You could track his movements. We see that Terrell went to Irwin Street, then he went to his friend's house, and then he came back to Taylor's house.
He came home around like 4 in the morning. The last time that Terrell's ankle monitor pinged was on Monticello Road around 7:45 a.m.
The discovery tells investigators they're close to locating Terrell, but they have a daunting task ahead.
So while we've narrowed down our search area, it's still a very large swath of area of creek beds and forest, and we don't have necessarily the same resources to conduct that search.
Coming up, investigators identify Taylor's alleged accomplice.
His real name is Eddie Brown.
And it seems they both had a potential motive.
She was planning to leave Terrell for Eddie. She had just had enough.
With the discovery of Terrell Sims' ankle monitor, investigators are becoming convinced Taylor Wardlaw is a suspect in a potential homicide. But without a body to prove it, they need to proceed with caution.
We're ready to talk to Taylor, but we're not ready to interrogate her yet. We want to talk to her just as a follow-up to the missing persons investigation. We don't want her to have any semblance that we're onto her as a homicide suspect.
We need to know what she knows without her knowing that we know that.
Taylor pretty much gives us the same story that she gave the initial investigator.
Since Taylor is sticking to her story, detectives turn their attention to her alleged accomplice.
I asked the witness if she knew who Youngster was, and she had met him a few times previously, but didn't have a, official name for him. Investigator Nowlin is very good at identifying and finding people, so I said, well, what better person to try and figure out Youngster's identity? Another one of my team members, they started calling up all the local rental car agencies to see if anyone had rented a car to Taylor. And sure enough, one did. And they said, yeah, when we got the car, it had some sort of damage to the hood that she didn't report. It's a bullet hole, just like the witness said it would be. We process portions of the car with a compound that will illuminate in the presence of blood, and we found that there were traces in the trunk of the car.
They can't be sure the blood is Terrell's until it's tested. As samples are sent to the lab for analysis, investigator Nowlin is having a breakthrough of her own.
The witness said that Youngster had assisted in dumping his body, and she gave us his Facebook name. I did my due diligence and went to Taylor's Facebook page and located one of her friends that was Youngster, and I identified him.
His real name is Eddie Brown. At the time, he lived with his aunt in the Colony Apartments.
Taylor had several Facebook pages that interacted with Eddie Brown.
Investigator now was able to ascertain that Eddie may have a more romantic connection to Taylor. Now we're looking at someone that may have premeditated this murder for romantic interest.
Nowlin checks security camera footage at the apartment complex on the day Terrell disappeared and makes another discovery.
The rental car came into the Colony Apartments at 4:33 in the morning, was there for 10 minutes.
You could see Taylor getting out of her car with her 2 children and take them inside of Youngster's apartment.
When she comes out, the kids are still in there, but she and Eddie get back into the car and they drive off.
Based on what the witness told us, we believed at that point when she comes in to pick Eddie up at 4:30 in the morning, Terrell's already dead.
The rental car appears outside the apartments again around 8:30 a.m., giving Taylor and Youngster plenty of time to get rid of Terrell's body. The question is, where?
While we're canvassing, we found a camera right on Monticello, and we just on a whim decided, let's pull this footage.
We see Taylor's rental car with a bullet hole in the front of it, driving outbound Monticello. And then coming back within about 20 minutes.
And we tried to create a map of how far can you get from this camera box, drive 10 minutes away, and drive 10 minutes back. And with that, we decided to organize a multi-jurisdictional search party. We started calling in other assets from the state. We had drones that were up. We had divers dredging through some of the creeks.
We have boats, we have helicopters, we have planes. We have more people than I can even count.
On January 5th, investigator Nowlin makes a gruesome discovery.
The search team had checked off all of the areas that they were designated to search. So I just followed Shavers Creek. I pulled up there and I looked down and see a trash bag with what looked like a body in it.
After over 2 weeks of searching, investigators have just discovered the body of Terrell Sims in an embankment.
Because it was so cold and the creek was so shallow, it actually preserved his body very well.
There were still a lot of features that were still evident. Tattoos could still be seen. We can still make out that, yes, that is Terrell.
Once the body is recovered, officers are able to make a positive identification while they await autopsy results. For Terrell's loved ones, the news is devastating.
I've been crying and going through emotions before because I already felt like he was gone. So when I heard it, it was like I was numb.
I'm glad they found him, rather than them not finding him at all. It was emotional, but at the same time, was a little bit of justice.
Later that day, Taylor Wardlaw is arrested and charged with murder.
When we arrested her, she had been on the phone. All she did was just say, I'm gonna have to call you back. She knew the game was up at that point.
Taylor immediately asks for a lawyer.
Do you wish to talk to us?
Yeah, but I still want a lawyer because I don't know why I'm here.
Okay. So you want a lawyer?
Mm-hmm.
On January 5th, 2022, a body that was believed to be the victim was located in Shavers Creek.
He's dead?
While Taylor is held in custody, investigators proceed to search the home for any evidence of a struggle.
There was a gun box for a 9mm Ruger in a safe in the house, but the gun was unaccounted for.
There was one swab from the living room door frame that presumptively tested positive for blood that came back to Terrell Sims' profile.
While investigators make plans to speak to Eddie Brown, the medical examiner's autopsy report gives them an idea of what happened in the apartment.
Once the autopsy is conducted, it gives us an estimate about how long he's been deceased, which had been, at this point, roughly 2 weeks. It tells us he's been shot 4 times. At least one of those shots was in the back.
The projectiles that were collected were consistent with being fired from a 9mm.
It's possible that the first shots were to the front, but somebody that is running away, there's no justification to shoot them in the back.
All of that just goes to show a cover-up of a killing versus if it was self-defense.
In the days that follow, 30-year-old Eddie Youngsta Brown is apprehended and questioned by police.
Eddie was nervous. He knew that he didn't kill Terrell. He didn't want to go down for that.
He did provide a statement. Eventually, admitting what his role was in this, which was assisting Taylor in putting the body from the home into the trunk of the car and then removing the monitor and assisting her with dumping the body into the creek.
Based off of our interview with him, we were confident that we had enough evidence to get a conviction for accessory after the fact to the murder. So we ended up charging him with that.
Eddie is released on bond while prosecutors prep the case for trial.
While waiting for trial, we're starting to get back some of the results from the forensic exams that we've done, specifically on the cell phones.
Taylor's phone records reveal a woman consumed by jealousy and thoughts of murder.
This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment choice. She had been contemplating this for a while.
When prosecutors review the evidence, witness statement, and video surveillance footage, it's clear to them Taylor Wardlaw conspired to kill her boyfriend, Terrell Sims. The final piece of the puzzle is motive, which her cell phone records provide.
We started to get back text messages, emails, different exchanges between Taylor and Eddie. And what we come to learn is there was a relationship going on between Taylor and Eddie. She was planning to, in some capacity, leave Terrell for Eddie.
Taylor might have been cheating with another man, but that didn't mean she could handle the thought of Terrell with another woman.
The only motive that we could clearly see was just her anger towards him that she thought he was cheating on her. She had been texting him in the days leading up about why he wasn't coming home and where was he and who was he with.
Everything that we gathered from her phone, it was just, she was jealous. If I can't have you, nobody can.
To the prosecution, Taylor was a powder keg waiting to explode. And it finally happened on December 20th.
She was calling him over and over and over that night. I'm sure that her rage was building over the course of those hours.
In her text messages, there's no outright premeditation being said, but it's the reading between the lines.
She's texting Eddie while this is all going on, saying that she thinks he's out cheating on her. He finally came home around 3:30, and then there's no phone activity for about 33 minutes.
We'll never truly know what happened that night. My best working theory is an argument broke out between him and Taylor. Taylor could have started it because of her insecurities and worries about his infidelity. I think something just kind of broke inside her mind. So we believe Taylor snapped. She pulled out a gun and shot him. She obviously had a plan because she knew to go immediately to Eddie. I think that she had just had enough.
After she convinced Eddie to help her get rid of Terrell's body, Taylor came up with a cover story and reported him missing.
I think it's really crazy how she killed him, disposed of him, and then helped everybody look for his body. That's just next level evil.
Taylor spends the next 2 years in jail awaiting trial.
It was very obvious in this case that they were going to go the route of self-defense, considering that he was already on an ankle monitor for allegedly assaulting her a year and a half prior. But if this was truly someone that she was scared of, then why would you call him so many times that night?
In an unexpected turn of events, the case never makes it to court. On March 25, 2024, Taylor cuts a deal with prosecutors and pleads guilty to voluntary manslaughter. She's sentenced to 20 years in prison.
I felt like the time they gave Taylor wasn't enough. I felt like justice wasn't served enough for him.
I thank God that she did plead guilty. It's not like I was happy, but I know God has the last say so.
She didn't have to do what she did. Regardless, she can't see her kids, and they'll be adults by the time she come out. So whether it was justice or not, there's losses in both places.
Terrell, he was a good person. I mean, he might not have been perfect, but if he can do anything to help anybody, that's what Terrell would do.
I would miss his laughs, his random text messages, sending me pictures of his kids, joking. We was robbed of more memories, more time.
The night didn't feel dangerous. That's what people would say later, over and over, as if repeating it could undo what happened. The air was thick, heavy with late summer heat, the kind that sticks to your skin even after midnight. Porch lights glowed softly along Maple Creek Road. Screens hummed. A distant TV flickered blue behind half-drawn curtains. Nothing out of place. Nothing loud. Nothing that warned anyone that, within minutes, a life would disappear without a trace. Emily Carter turned onto her street at 11:53 p.m. The tires rolled slowly over familiar pavement. She had driven this route hundreds of times. Every mailbox, every tree, every crack in the road, known, memorized, safe. Her headlights swept across her own driveway. Empty. Still. Waiting. She pulled in, aligned the car neatly the way her father had taught her years before. Engine off. Silence rushed in instantly, thick and complete. For a second, she just sat there, hands still on the wheel, breathing. It was the kind of pause people never remember. But it was the last normal moment she would ever have. Because the second she opened that car door, something changed. No scream echoed into the night. No struggle disturbed the quiet street. No neighbor stepped outside to check on a noise. There was nothing. Only silence swallowing everything whole. By morning, Emily Carter was gone. Her car sat exactly where she left it, parked straight, door locked. No damage. No sign of panic. Nothing broken, nothing out of place. Except her. Missing. Vanished somewhere between the driver's seat and her front door, less than 30 feet. A distance so small it made no sense. At 8:12 a.m., the first patrol unit arrived. Routine at first. Missing teenager. Possibly a runaway. Officers had seen it before. They stepped into the Carter home expecting the usual signs. A packed bag, a hidden note, something impulsive, emotional, explainable. They found none of it. Her bedroom was untouched. Clothes still folded. Shoes lined neatly by the closet. A notebook open on her desk with half-finished math problems. A red circle drawn around the next morning's date.
College prep meeting.
Important.
Planned.
People who plan for the future don't disappear hours before it begins. Her mother's voice cut through the assumptions almost immediately. She didn't run. Firm.
Certain.
Not a question. Not denial. A statement. Officers exchanged glances. They'd heard that line before, too. But something about the room, the stillness, the order, the absence of disruption, forced them to hesitate. By noon, the classification changed. Not runaway. Missing under suspicious circumstances. And just like that, everything shifted. The neighborhood tightened. Doors that were once casually left unlocked now clicked shut. Curtains stayed closed longer than usual. People watched each other in ways they never had before. Because the question wasn't just where is she? It became, how does someone disappear without a sound? Investigators started outside. Driveway first. Concrete held no obvious answers. No blood.
No drag marks.
No broken glass. But something subtle caught their attention, a faint impression near the passenger side of the car. Barely visible. Distorted. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. A shoe print. Not hers. Too large. Different tread. Someone had been standing there. Waiting. The position suggested stillness, not movement. Weight settled into one spot long enough to leave a mark. Someone who didn't just pass by. Someone who stayed. They mapped it out carefully. Emily exits the vehicle. Closes the door. Steps around the front. And then, she encounters someone already there. Close enough to speak. Close enough to act. But there were no signs of a fight. No defensive wounds reported later. No disturbed ground.
No scattered belongings.
Which meant one of two things. She trusted the person. Or she didn't have time to react. Neither option felt better than the other. Search teams expanded outward. Fields beyond the neighborhood were combed inch by inch. Dogs tracked her scent from the car to the edge of the driveway. And then nothing. No trail leading away. No direction. It stopped so abruptly it felt unnatural. As if she had been removed from the scene entirely. Lifted.
Taken.
Erased. Helicopters circled low. Volunteers formed lines across open land. Flyers appeared on every corner, every storefront, every gas station window. Missing. Last seen. 17 years old. Her photo stared back at the town from every direction. And still nothing came back. Tips flooded in within days. A caller claimed to see her at a truck stop miles away. Investigated. False. Another reported a suspicious van parked nearby that night.
Traced.
Unrelated. A psychic hotline insisted she was alive but hidden. Filed away with the rest. Each lead raised hope for a moment, then collapsed into nothing. The case began to stretch thin. But one detail refused to disappear. The timeline. 11:32 p.m. leaves her friend's house. 11:47 p.m. captured on a gas station security camera, driving alone. 11:53 p.m. arrives home. Between 11:53 and what? No one knew. There was no witness to the exact moment she vanished. Except maybe someone had seen something. A neighbor, 2 houses down, came forward late. Not immediately, not confidently, but enough to matter. He described seeing movement near the Carter driveway around midnight. A figure. Or maybe just a shadow. He couldn't be certain. It was quick, subtle, easy to dismiss. At the time, he didn't think it mattered. Now it was the only thing that did. Investigators pushed harder into the neighborhood.
Door to door.
Again and again. Who was awake?
Who heard anything?
Who saw anything out of place? Most answers stayed the same. Nothing. Quiet night. Normal. Too normal. Because somewhere in that silence, something had happened with precision.
No noise. No chaos.
No mistakes, at least none that could be seen. Attention turned inward. Not to passing strangers. Not to random chance. But to someone who knew the street. Someone who understood the routine. Someone who knew exactly when Emily would come home. They built a list. Neighbors. Regular visitors. People with access, visibility, familiarity. Names were written, crossed off, written again. Background checks followed. Interviews, alibis. Most held up. One stood out briefly, then faded. A man who lived just down the street. Quiet. Unremarkable. He kept his lawn trimmed, waved occasionally, never stayed long in conversation.
No complaints.
No criminal record. No reason to suspect him of anything. The kind of person people forget. The kind of person who blends in so completely they disappear without leaving. Investigators noted his name.
Spoke to him.
Nothing raised alarms.
No inconsistencies. No visible tensión. He was calm,
Cooperative. Ordinary. And in a case desperate for something extraordinary. Ordinary felt safe. So they moved on. Weeks passed. Then months. Search efforts slowed. Media coverage thinned. New cases took priority. New tragedies demanded attention. Emily Carter's disappearance slipped quietly into the background. Her room remained untouched at home. Her mother refused to change anything. Her father checked the driveway some nights, standing in the exact spot where the car had been. As if repetition could rewrite the outcome. But time moved forward anyway. And the case stalled. No body.
no weapon. No suspect.
Just a question that refused to answer itself. How does someone vanish in less than 30 feet? The file was eventually marked Cold Case. A label that doesn't close anything. It just admits defeat. Years layered over the truth. Evidence degraded. Memories blurred. Witnesses moved away or forgot small details that once seemed unimportant. But one thing remained. That shoe print.
Logged. Stored.
Preserved. Useless at the time. Because in 1998, it was just a pattern. No database. No match. No identity. Just a silent piece of a puzzle no one could solve. Until technology changed. Until science caught up. Until the smallest trace left behind, something invisible to everyone standing on that driveway that night, became the loudest voice in the case. And when it finally spoke, it didn't point to a stranger. It didn't lead far from Maple Creek Road. It didn't unravel a complex network of unknown suspects. It did something far more unsettling. It circled back. Back to the street. Back to the houses. Back to the people who had stood under those same porch lights, shaken their heads, and said they heard nothing. Back to someone who had always been there. Watching. Waiting. Blending into the silence. A neighbor. The kind no one ever questions. The kind no one ever sees until it's too late. For years, nothing moved. The file sat in a metal cabinet, buried under newer cases, newer names, newer tragedies. Dust gathered along the edges. Paper yellowed slowly. Ink faded just enough to make everything feel older than it already was. Emily Carter became a memory people stopped saying out loud. Not because they forgot. Because remembering hurt too much. Maple Creek Road returned to its rhythm. Lawns cut on Sundays. Trash bins rolled out on Thursdays. Kids grew up, moved away, came back with families of their own. The house at the end of the street stayed the same, but everything around it shifted. And yet, something invisible never left. Attention. A quiet awareness that what happened there had never been explained. That whatever took Emily had never been found. And worse, might have never left. Inside the police department, the case was officially labeled cold, but not closed. That distinction mattered. It meant the door was still open, even if no one was walking through it. Every few years, a detective would pull the file. Flip through it. Read the same statements. Study the same photos. and come to the same conclusion. No entry point. No exit trail. No suspect with enough weight to hold. Just a clean disappearance. Too clean. In 2006, 8 years after Emily vanished, the case resurfaced briefly. Not because of a breakthrough. Because of a pattern. A neighboring county reported a similar incident, a young woman disappearing late at night, close to home. No signs of struggle. Investigators compare notes. Timelines. Geography. Behavioral patterns. For a moment, it felt like something larger was forming. A serial pattern, a connection. But it didn't hold. The second case had subtle differences. Forced entry, a witness, a timeline that stretched too far. The illusion collapsed. Emily's case slipped back into isolation. Still alone. Still unanswered. Technology advanced quietly in the background. DNA analysis evolved. Databases expanded.
Technique Sharpend.
What once required large samples now needed only fragments. Invisible traces became visible. Old evidence became new again. But only if someone was willing to look. In 2018, 20 years after the disappearance, the Carter case was assigned to Detective Alan Reyes. He wasn't the first to reopen it. But he was the first to treat it like it wasn't dead. Reyes didn't start with theories. He started with frustration. Because the file didn't make sense. It was too quiet. Too controlled.
No chaos. No randomness.
Whatever happened that night had been deliberate. Measured. And that meant one thing. It wasn't luck. It was planning. He revisited the scene. Maple Creek Road looked different, but not entirely. Some houses had been repainted. Trees had grown taller. New cars lined the driveways. But the Carter house still held its shape. Still faced the street the same way. Still carried the same distance between driveway and front door. 30 feet. Reyes stood there longer than necessary. Measuring it with his eyes. Walking it slowly. Again. And again. Because every instinct told him. This wasn't a random grab. This was an intercept. Someone knew exactly where to be. Exactly when. He dug into the original evidence logs. Item by item. Most were routine. Clothing samples. Fiber traces. Photographs. Then he found it again. The shoe print. Logged but unresolved. And something else. A small piece of collected debris from near the passenger side of the vehicle. At the time, it had been dismissed. Too small. Too degraded. No immediate value. But Reyes didn't see it that way. Because in 1998, they didn't have what he had now. He sent the sample for reanalysis.
No expectations.
Just a question. Could there be anything left? Weeks passed. Then the call came.
Short.
Controlled, but different. They found something. Not a full profile. Not a clean hit. But enough. A partial DNA sequence. Tiny. Fragmented. But real. And more importantly, usable. The lab began reconstructing. Layer by layer. Pulling data from what little remained. Comparing it against modern databases. Running it through systems that didn't exist when Emily disappeared. The process wasn't fast. But it was relentless. Because even a fragment can point somewhere. When the first result came back, it didn't name a suspect. It pointed to a family line. A genetic connection.
Distant.
But traceable. Reyes leaned into it immediately. Because this was the first real movement the case had seen in 2 decades. A direction. A thread. The genealogical analysis built outward. Mapping relatives. Branches of a family tree that stretched across states. Names began to form. Dozens at first. Then narrowed. Cross-referenced with location history. Geographic proximity. Age. Presence in Texas in 1998. The list shrank. Slowly. Deliberately. Until only a few names remained. One of them didn't make sense at first. Because it was too close. Too obvious. Too overlooked. The man had lived on Maple Creek Road. At the time, 2 houses down from the Carters. Still living there now. Same house. Same routine. Same quiet presence. Reyes paused when he saw the address. Because it was already in the file. Already interviewed. Already dismissed. He pulled the original report. Read the transcript. Nothing unusual. Answers were steady. Consistent. Forgettable. But that was 20 years ago. Before DNA. Before patterns were clear. Before anyone thought to look deeper. Now the question wasn't could it be him? It was. Why didn't they see it? Surveillance began quietly. No announcements. No pressure. Just observation. The man's name didn't circulate beyond a small circle. Because if this was wrong, it would collapse everything. And if it was right, they needed to be careful. He was older now. Mid-60s. Routine unchanged. Morning walks, grocery trips, occasional conversations with neighbors. Still polite. Still distant. Still invisible. Reyes watched him from a distance more than once. Not looking for action. Looking for something harder to define. Recognition. Instinct. A sense that something beneath the surface didn't match the image. But nothing obvious appeared. No aggression. No sleep. No sign of guilt. Just a quiet man living a quiet life. Exactly as he had been described in 1998. Which made it worse. Because if this was him, then he had carried it for 20 years. Without breaking. Without speaking. Without leaving anything behind. Except that trace. That single fragment of DNA. Reyes moved forward. Carefully. Legally. They needed a direct sample. Something to compare. Something undeniable. But they couldn't ask for it. Not yet. Not without risking everything. So they waited. Watched. And looked for opportunity. Because even the most careful people leave something behind. Eventually. And when that moment came, it would either confirm the unthinkable or send the case back into silence. But one thing was already clear. The truth had never been far. It had never crossed state lines. Never vanished into some unknown network. It had stayed exactly where it began. On a quiet street. Under familiar lights. Behind an ordinary door. And if the DNA was right, then Emily Carter hadn't been taken by a stranger in the dark. She had been taken by someone who knew the street. Knew the timing. Knew her. A neighbor. Still there. Still unseen. Still waiting for someone to finally connect the pieces. The first real break didn't come from a confession. It came from a cup. Plain. Disposable. Left behind on a public bench outside a grocery store just 3 miles from Maple Creek Road. It had been a quiet morning. No urgency. No sign that anything significant had just happened. The man had sat there for less than 10 minutes, sipping slowly, staring ahead like he always did. No phone.
No distractions.
Just routine. When he stood up, he didn't look back. He threw the cup into a trash bin and walked away. And for the first time in 20 years, he left something behind that could speak. Detectives moved in carefully. Gloves.
Bags. No mistakes.
The cup was retrieved within minutes, sealed,
Logged.
transported directly to the lab.
No headlines. No announcements.
Just silence again. Because everything now depended on what that cup could reveal. Back in the lab, technicians worked with precision that bordered on obsession. The sample had to be clean.
No contamination.
No doubt. Because if the DNA from that cup matched the partial profile pulled from the Carter driveway, the entire case would shift. Not reopen. Explode. Days passed. Then a result. Not dramatic, not loud. Just a quiet confirmation that changed everything.
Match.
Not partial. Not probable. A direct genetic link between the DNA recovered in 1998 and the man who had just thrown away that cup. The room didn't react immediately. There was no celebration. Because what they were looking at wasn't a breakthrough. It was something heavier. Something irreversible. A name that had lived quietly inside a police file for 2 decades, now connected to the only physical evidence ever recovered from the scene. Reyes stared at the report longer than necessary. Reading it once. Then again. Because the implication wasn't just that they had a suspect. It meant they had been right there in 1998.
2 houses away.
Close enough to hear a car door close. Close enough to watch. Close enough to step in at exactly the right moment. The man had a name. Daniel Hargrove. 64 years old. Retired maintenance worker. No criminal record. No history of violence. No prior investigations beyond that single interview in 1998. A clean file. Too clean. Reyes pulled the original transcript again. Line by line. Now it sounded different. Not suspicious. Not obviously deceptive. But controlled. Answers were short. Careful.
No unnecessary detail. No emotion.
At the time, it had read like cooperation. Now it felt like containment. Did you see anything unusual that night?
No.
Did you hear anything?
No.
Were you outside at any point? Just earlier in the evening. What time did you go to bed? Before midnight. Everything aligned just enough to pass. Just enough to be dismissed. But now there was something they didn't have back then. Proof that he had been there. Standing close enough to Emily's car to leave DNA behind. The question changed instantly. From who could it be? To what exactly happened in those 30 feet?
Surveillance tightened.
No more passive observation. Every movement logged. Every routine tracked. Hargrove didn't change. That was the most unsettling part. He woke early. Watered his lawn. Checked his mailbox. Drove the same routes. A life built on repetition. Predictable. Quiet. Unremarkable. The same way it had been described 20 years ago. But now every detail carried weight. Because behind that routine was something no one had ever seen. Or maybe something no one had ever looked for. Investigators began building the case backward. Not just from DNA. From behavior. From opportunity. From absence. Because in 1998, no one saw him. And that was the problem. No confirmed alibi. No witness placing him inside his home at the exact time Emily disappeared. Just a statement. A claim. One that had never been challenged. Reyes expanded the scope. Pulled records. Employment logs. Schedules. Any trace of who Hargrove had been in 1998. It painted a picture that was empty. Work. Home. Repeat. No close relationships. No known conflicts. No sudden changes. Just a man existing quietly within the same narrow radius of his own life. Neighbors were re-interviewed. Carefully. Without revealing the DNA connection. Most struggled to remember details from that far back. But a few things surfaced. Small, incomplete, but consistent. He kept to himself. Always outside, late, sometimes just standing there. Watched the street more than most people. At the time, those details meant nothing. Now, they carried a different tone. Observation. Presence. Awareness. One neighbor paused during questioning. Longer than the others. Then said something that stuck. I remember thinking he was always there when you didn't expect him to be. Not doing anything wrong. Not acting out. Just present. In moments that didn't quite add up. Reyes returned to the driveway again. Night this time. Same hour. Same silence. He stood where the shoe print had been found. Looked toward Hargrove's house. 2 properties down. A clear line of sight. Unobstructed. Even in low light. From that position, you could see a car pull in. You could see someone step out. You could see everything you needed if you were watching. Waiting. The reconstruction became sharper. More defined.
Hargrove 6 Emily arrive.
He steps out. Moves quickly but calmly. Positions himself near the passenger side. Waits. She exits the car. Walks around the front. And then, he's there. Close enough to speak. Familiar enough not to alarm her immediately. Or fast enough to control the moment before it escalates. Still no signs of struggle. Which meant whatever happened next happened quietly. Efficiently. The absence of noise became its own kind of evidence. Because it suggested control. Planning. Experience, or at least preparation. Search warrants were drafted. Carefully built around the DNA match. Every detail reviewed. Every step documented. Because after 20 years, there was no room for error. When the warrant was approved, the team moved at dawn.
No sirens.
No warning. Just a knock on a door that had never been forced open before. Hargrove answered.
Calm.
Unshaken. As if he had been expecting something or nothing at all. He didn't resist. Didn't ask many questions. Just stepped aside.
Let them in.
The house was exactly what you'd expect.
Clean.
Ordered. Minimal. Nothing immediately out of place. No visible signs of violence.
No hidden chows.
Just a life contained. But investigators weren't looking for the obvious. They were looking for what had been hidden long enough to survive 20 years. Basement. Storage areas. Old boxes. Items that hadn't been touched in years. That's where time forgets things. And sometimes where truth stays buried. Every inch was processed. Every item cataloged. Because even now, they didn't know what they would find. Or if they would find anything at all. Hargrove sat quietly in the living room as the search unfolded. Hands folded. Eyes steady.
No visible panique. No denial.
Just silence. The same silence that had surrounded the case from the beginning. But this time, That silence was closing in on him. Because the DNA had already spoken. And whatever else remained inside that house would either confirm the worst possibility or leave just enough doubt to keep the case alive. Outside, Maple Creek Road began to wake. Neighbors stepped out, noticed the unmarked vehicles, the quiet presence of law enforcement. Curiosity spread quickly. Then tension. Then something heavier. Because deep down, everyone understood what this meant. The answer had never been far. Never hidden in some distant place. Never carried away by a stranger passing through. It had stayed here. All along. Behind a door they walked past every day. Next to a man they nodded to without thinking. And, as the search continued, one question settled over everything. Not whether he had been there. That was already proven. But what he had done after Emily stepped out of that car. Because somewhere inside that quiet house, or somewhere long forgotten beyond it, was the final piece of a story that had refused to end. And once it surfaced, there would be no silence left to hide behind. The house didn't resist. That was the first thing investigators noticed.
No locked interior doors. No barricades.
No hurried attempt to hide anything. It felt settled, as if whatever secrets lived there had been undisturbed for years, buried not by effort, but by time. Dust rested evenly across shelves. Boxes were stacked with care, labeled in faded marker, tools, winter, garage. Nothing dramatic. Nothing urgent. But cases like this didn't break open with obvious answers. They revealed themselves slowly. Layer by layer. The basement door creaked when it opened. A sound too loud for the stillness around it. Flashlights cut through the dim air, catching floating dust particles that drifted lazily, untouched for years. The concrete floor was clean, almost deliberately so.
No stands visible.
No signs of disturbance. But investigators didn't trust surfaces. They never had.
Luminol came next.
A quiet spray. A chemical whisper across the floor. Then darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, faint. Barely visible.
A glow.
Small. Irregular. Almost nothing unless you knew what you were looking at. Traces. Not recent. Not fresh. But not natural either. Something had been there. Something cleaned. Not perfectly. Just enough. Reyes crouched lower, eyes locked on the pattern. It wasn't random. It followed a shape. A drag?
No.
Too inconsistent. More like contact points. Moments where something or someone touched the surface briefly, then moved. They marked it. Photographed everything. Measured distances. Because even after 20 years, patterns remain. Upstairs, another team moved through drawers, cabinets, closets. Routine items filled the space. Utensils. Old receipts. Manuals for appliances long outdated. Nothing connected directly. Nothing screamed guilt. But again, that wasn't how this worked. Then a box. Stored deep in a hallway closet. Not labeled. Out of place among the rest. Inside papers. Old ones. Folded. Yellowed. And, beneath them, fabric. Small.
Soft.
Not immediately identifiable. Until it was. A hair tie.
Simple. Worn.
But not his. Next to it, something else. A thin silver chain. Tangled slightly, as if it had been placed there without care. Reyes didn't need confirmation in that moment. He already felt it. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. The items were bagged immediately, handled with precision. Because now the case wasn't just built on DNA. It was building a story, a timeline that stretched from 1998 into the present. Hargrove hadn't moved. Still seated. Still silent. Watching nothing in particular. When they brought the evidence out, he didn't react.
No visible shift. No denial. No recognition.
Just the same stillness he had held since the door opened. That stillness began to feel unnatural. Not calm. Not composed. Something else. Something controlled. Reyes stepped into the room. Held the bag up, just slightly. Not as an accusation. Just enough. This mean anything to you? Hargrove's eyes moved. Briefly. Then back.
No.
Flat. Immediate. Too immediate. Reyes didn't push. Not yet. Because the truth wasn't in what he said. It was in everything he didn't. The lab worked faster now. The recovered items were processed immediately. Hair fibers, skin cells, any trace that could tie them directly to Emily Carter. The results came back within days. Not weeks. Not months.
Days. Match.
Both items. Confirmed. Beyond doubt. The hair tie belonged to Emily. The chain matched photos provided by her family, one she had been wearing the night she disappeared. The room went quiet when the report was read. Because this wasn't just presence anymore. This was possession. Retention. A piece of her life kept hidden for 20 years. Inside his house. The narrative shifted again. Not just he was there. But he took something with him. Interrogation was scheduled immediately. No more waiting. No more observation. It was time to confront him. The room was small. Neutral. Cold in that way all interrogation rooms are. Hargrove sat with the same posture. Hands folded. Back straight. Eyes steady. Reyes entered slowly. Placed the evidence photos on the table. One by one.
No ruse.
No dramatic movement. Just letting the weight settle. This was found in your house. Silence. They belonged to Emily Carter. Nothing. Reyes leaned forward slightly. Your DNA was at the scene. Still nothing. The silence stretched.
Long.
Uncomfortable. But Hargrove didn't shift. Didn't fidget. Didn't break. Reyes changed approach. Softened the tone. Not aggressive. Not accusatory. Just direct. You were there that night. A pause. Then. I live there. First words with weight. Measured. Careful. Reyes nodded.
Yes.
You do. Another pause. You were outside. No answer. You saw her. Silence again. But something had changed. Not in his words. In his breathing.
Slight.
Almost invisible.
But there.
Reyes pressed just enough. What happened after she got out of the car? That was the moment. The question that had waited 20 years.
Hanging in the air.
Heavy. Unanswered. Hargrove looked down.
For the first time.
Not long. Just a second. Then back up. I don't know what you think happened.
Calm. Too calm.
Reyes didn't respond immediately. Let it sit. Because denial wasn't unexpected. Not yet. Not at this stage. But the pressure had shifted. Because now, there was no doubt he had been there. No doubt he had taken something. No doubt he had kept it. What remained was the part he refused to say. Outside, the story had begun to spread. Not officially. Not confirmed. But quietly. Neighbors saw the search. The vehicles. The questions. And rumors formed quickly. Names whispered. Connections drawn. And when the names surfaced, it didn't land with disbelief. It landed with something worse. Recognition. Because suddenly small memories came back. Moments that didn't matter before. Times he was outside too late. Too often. Watching. Always watching. The kind of details that mean nothing until they mean everything. Back in the interrogation room, the silence returned. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with everything they now knew. Everything he knew they knew. Reyes stood slowly. Collected the photos. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't push harder. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. As he reached the door, he paused. Just long enough. Then said, "She never made it inside."
No accusation.
No question. Just a statement. Hargrove didn't respond. But his eyes followed Reyes to the door. And for the first time, there was something there. Not fear. Not guilt. Something deeper. Something buried for 20 years. Starting to surface. Because the silence that protected him for so long was beginning to crack. And once it broke, there would be no way to put it back together. Somewhere in that house, or somewhere far from it, was the final answer. What happened after Emily stepped out of that car? Where she went? What he did next? And now, for the first time in 2 decades, they were closer than ever to finding out. Not a theory. Not a possibility. The truth. Waiting just beneath the surface. Refusing to stay hidden any longer. The silence didn't break. It shifted. That was the difference. For 20 years, Daniel Hargrove had lived inside a silence that protected him, a quiet built on absence, on the lack of evidence, on a story that never moved forward. Now that silence had weight. It pressed in from every direction. It carried names, dates, DNA, objects pulled from hidden corners of his own house. And still he didn't confess. The interrogation resumed the next morning. Same room. Same chair. Same stillness. But the energy had changed. Because now the questions weren't searching. They were narrowing. Reyes didn't rush. He placed a photo on the table. Emily Carter, smiling, unaware of what the next hours would become. Then another, the driveway. Then the evidence bag. Hair tie.
Chain.
Your DNA was there, Reyes said, calm measured. You had her belongings in your house. You were outside that night. No response. Hargrove's gaze stayed fixed ahead. Not defiant. Not cooperative. Just contained. Reyes leaned back slightly. You didn't plan for this to come back. A pause. You thought it was gone. Still nothing. That was the pattern. Hargrove wasn't arguing. He wasn't denying in detail. He was absorbing. Letting statements pass without resistance. Because resistance creates openings. And Hargrove didn't give openings. Reyes changed angle. Not evidence.
Time.
20 years, he said quietly. That's how long you've lived with it. A flicker. Barely visible.
But there.
The first real crack. Every morning, Reyes continued. Same street, same houses, same driveway. Silence tightened. Knowing what happened there, Hargrove's hands shifted slightly. Not much, but enough. Reyes didn't press harder.
He knew that moment.
The edge where pressure could either open something or shut it down completely. Instead, he stood, walked slowly toward the door,
Paused.
then said, "We're going to find her." No threat, no raised voice, just certainty. That sentence lingered longer than any accusation, because for the first time, it introduced something Hargrove couldn't control.
Discovery.
Outside the interrogation room, the investigation accelerated. The house had been processed, but it wasn't enough. The evidence connected him to Emily, connected him to the moment. But it didn't answer the final question. Where did she go? Search teams expanded beyond Maple Creek Road. Old maps were pulled. Property records from 1998. Vacant land.
Construction zone.
Places that existed then, but didn't now. Because time doesn't just hide evidence. It changes the landscape entirely. One location stood out. A stretch of land less than a mile from Hargrove's house. Back in 1998, it had been undeveloped. Open ground. Partially wooded.
No lighting.
No traffic. Now, it was something else entirely. A row of small industrial buildings. Concrete.
Paved.
Altered beyond recognition. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in. Not immediately.
Carefully. Quietly.
Because if this was wrong, it would collapse the fragile structure they had built. The scans began early in the morning. Equipment moved slowly across the surface. Lines forming. Data collecting. Nothing visible to the eye. Everything hidden beneath. At first, nothing. Flat readings. Uniform. Expected. Then,
An anomaly.
small. Irregular. Deeper than natural disturbance. Not large, but distinct. The team stopped. Rescanned. Confirmed. The signal remained. Same depth. Same shape. Excavation followed. Slow.
Precise.
Every inch documented. Because this wasn't just digging. This was the moment everything pointed toward. The first layer was easy. Loose soil.
Gravel.
Modern fill. Then deeper. Older layers. Undisturbed for years. Time slowed. No one spoke.
No one needed to.
Because everyone understood what they were approaching. Then, a fragment. Not large. Not immediately identifiable. But enough. Enough to stop everything. Forensic specialists moved in. Cleared the area carefully. Brushed away soil. Revealed more.
Bone.
The site shifted instantly. From search to recovery. From possibility to reality. The remains were incomplete. Fragmented. But consistent. Human. Buried deliberately. Not deep enough to disappear forever. But deep enough to last. Reyes stood at the edge of the excavation. Didn't step closer.
Didn't need to.
Because after 20 years, the question had changed again. Not if they would find her, but how much would be left. Back at the station, Hargrove sat in the same chair. unmoved, unchanged, as if the outside world hadn't shifted at all. Reyes entered. No folder this time. No photos. Just presence. They found something. The words landed differently. Not speculative. Not theoretical. Real. Hargrove's eyes lifted. Slightly. Less than a mile from your house. A pause. Buried. The silence stretched. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It carried weight now. Pressure. Reyes stepped closer. Not aggressive. Not loud. Just closer. You had 20 years. Another pause. 20 years to say something. Hargrove looked down again. Longer this time. Hands tightening slightly. The room held still. Waiting. When he spoke, it wasn't a confession. Not yet. I didn't mean. The sentence stopped. Cut short. As if the words themselves had weight he couldn't carry. Reyes didn't interrupt. Didn't push. Because that fragment, those two words, were more than anything they had gotten before. I didn't mean, Hargrove repeated, quieter. Then silence again. Intent.
Accident.
Control lost. Control regained. Those were the possibilities now. All of them darker than the last. Reyes finally spoke. What happened? No immediate answer. Just breathing. Heavy now. Uneven. Outside, the story was no longer contained. News had begun to spread. Quietly at first. Then faster. Cold case reopened. Remains discovered. Local man questioned. Maple Creek Road felt different. Not tense. Not shocked. Something deeper. A realization settling in. The truth had been there. Always. Not hidden far away. Not lost in some distant place. Right there. In the spaces between houses. In the quiet moments no one paid attention to. Back in the interrogation room, Hargrove sat at the edge of something he had avoided for 2 decades. The moment where silence no longer protected him. Where evidence filled every gap. Where the past wasn't buried anymore. Reyes didn't speak again.
Didn't need to.
Because now, the next move belonged to Hargrove. And for the first time since 1998, he had nowhere left to step. Whatever happened in those 30 feet, whatever decision was made in those few seconds after Emily stepped out of her car, whatever followed in the darkness beyond that driveway, it was no longer hidden. Not by time. Not by silence. Not by the life he built around it. The ground had given something back. The evidence had closed the distance. And the truth, finally, was within reach. Waiting for the moment he would say it out loud. The words didn't come all at once. They came in pieces. Broken. Uneven. Like something forced through a space too small to hold it. Daniel Hargrove sat forward now, elbows resting on the table, hands no longer folded but pressed together tightly, fingers locked as if they were the only thing keeping him anchored. His eyes stayed down, fixed somewhere between the surface of the table and a place much further back in time. Reyes didn't interrupt. Didn't rush him. Because after 20 years, silence doesn't break with force. It collapses under its own weight. I saw her pull in, Hargrove said finally, voice low, dry, and used to being heard.
No emotion.
Just fact. Reyes leaned slightly forward, but didn't speak. Let it continue. I was outside. A pause. I couldn't sleep. Another pause. I walked sometimes. Simple statements. Too simple. Stripped of anything that might explain why. She got out of the car, he continued. I was already there. That line hung heavier than the rest. Because it confirmed everything. The position. The timing. The waiting. Reyes spoke quietly. You were waiting for her? A slight shake of the head.
No.
Too fast. Instinctive. But incomplete. Hargrove swallowed. I didn't plan it. There it was. Not denial. Not innocence.
A shift.
Reyes didn't challenge it. Not yet. Then what happened? Hargrove's hands tightened. Knuckles whitening. She saw me, he said. She didn't expect anyone. His voice faltered slightly. First crack of emotion. Small. But real. I said something. I don't remember what. Just something normal. Normal. The word didn't fit. Not here. Not in that moment. She stopped, he went on. Just for a second. A second. That was all it took. Reyes kept his tone steady. Did she know you? Another pause.
Yeah.
I mean, she'd seen me before. Neighbor.
Familiar.
Safe enough not to run immediately. She didn't look scared, Hargrove said, almost to himself. Not yet. The room felt smaller now.
Tighter.
Because the story was forming. Not as a narrative. As fragments. Moments stitched together. I stepped closer, he continued. Reyes didn't move. Didn't break the rhythm. I don't know why.
A lie.
Or something close to it. Because people don't step closer without a reason. They just don't always admit it. She tried to go around me, he said.
There. The shift.
The moment control changed hands. I grabbed her. The words landed hard. Flat. Unadorned.
No justification. No explanation.
Just action. Reyes let the silence absorb it. Because once that line is crossed, everything after it changes. She didn't scream right away, Hargrove said. She froze. A natural response.
Shock.
Confusion. A brain trying to understand something that shouldn't be happening. But then she did. His voice dropped lower. She screamed. There it was. The sound no one reported. The sound swallowed by distance. Or by something else. I covered her mouth, he said quickly.
Too quickly.
As if trying to outrun the memory. Reyes spoke carefully. With what? My hand. A pause. Then I don't know, I just held her.
Held.
The word was wrong. But he used it anyway. She was fighting, Hargrove added, almost reluctantly. Of course she was. I didn't mean to, he started again. Stopped. Breath catching. Reyes didn't fill the gap. Let it hang. She couldn't breathe, Hargrove said. And just like that, the entire room shifted. Not a plan. Not a drawn-out act. A moment that escalated. Control lost.
Control forced.
And then, too late. I let go, he continued. She wasn't moving. Flat again. Detached. As if describing something he had watched happen. Not something he had done. Reyes' voice stayed even. What did you do then? A long silence. Longer than any before. Because this was the part he had lived with.
The part that followed.
The part that required decisions. I panicked, Hargrove said. The word came out hollow.
Warn.
Repeated in his own mind too many times over the years. I didn't know what to do. But he had done something. I took her, he said. Another fragment. Another piece. Where? Reyes asked. Hargrove closed his eyes briefly. Not in refusal. In recall. The field. A pause. The one that's not there anymore. Reyes nodded slowly. Less than a mile. Exactly where they found her. I carried her, Hargrove added. The image formed immediately.
Wait.
Distance. Darkness. A body that no longer moved.
No one saw, he said.
Again. A statement. Not relief. Not pride. Just fact. I buried her. And that was it. The line between disappearance and truth.
Crossed.
The room stayed quiet. No reaction. No sudden movement. Because this wasn't a moment for drama. It was a moment for confirmation. Reyes spoke softly. Why did you keep her things? Hargrove's eyes opened again. For a second, they looked different. Not defensive.
Not blank.
Something else. I don't know. A weak answer. A deflection. You kept them for 20 years, Reyes said. Not accusing. Just stating. Hargrove looked down again. Longer this time. I forgot about them, he said. But that wasn't true. People don't forget things they hide that carefully. They were in a box, he added, as if that explained something. As if distance from the object erased connection to it. Reyes didn't argue. Because the truth was already clear. Those items weren't forgotten. They were contained. Like everything else. Outside, the case had already changed. From mystery to answer. From question to confession. But inside that room, it still felt incomplete. Because even with everything said, there was something missing. Reyes leaned forward slightly. One more thing. A pause. Why her? That question lingered longer than any other. Because it wasn't about evidence. Or sequence. It was about intent. Hargrove didn't answer immediately. Didn't look up. Didn't shift. When he finally spoke, it wasn't what Reyes expected. She was there.
Simple.
Empty.
Terrifying.
Not targeted. Not planned. Not chosen for who she was. Just present. At the wrong moment. In the wrong place. Reyes sat back. The weight of that answer settling in. Because randomness isn't less frightening. It's more. The confession was complete. Not polished. Not structured. But enough. Enough to close the gap that had existed for 20 years. Emily Carter hadn't vanished. She had been stopped. Interrupted. Taken in a moment that shouldn't have existed. And the man responsible had lived within sight of that moment. Every day since. As Hargrove sat there, the silence returned. But it wasn't protective anymore. It didn't shield him. Didn't hide anything. It exposed everything. Because the truth was no longer buried. Not in the ground. Not in a box. Not in his memory. It was out.
Spoken.
Irreversible. And for the first time since 1998, There were no missing pieces left to hide behind. Only the aftermath. And the weight of what had always been there, waiting to be uncovered. The confession did not bring relief. That was the part nobody expected. For 20 years, the people of Maple Creek Road believed that answers would heal the wound. They imagined the phone call, the press conference, the moment when investigators would finally say the words everyone had been waiting for. We found her. But when the truth finally arrived, it did not feel like victory. It felt like the last piece of a nightmare falling into place. Because answers can end uncertainty. But they cannot erase what happened. The morning after Daniel Hargrove's confession, the town woke up to a reality it had spent 2 decades refusing to imagine. The quiet neighbor. The man who waved politely. The man who fixed broken fences and kept his yard trimmed. The man who lived among them without suspicion. His name was now connected forever to the disappearance of Emily Carter. The headlines spread quickly. Texas cold case breakthrough. DNA evidence links neighbor to 1998 disappearance. 2-decade mystery finally solved. But behind the headlines was something much heavier. A family receiving the answer they had wanted. And the answer they had feared most. Emily's parents had spent 20 years living between hope and grief. They never received the goodbye that most families eventually face.
No funeral. No final moment. No certainty.
Only questions. Every unknown car. Every unfamiliar face. Every late-night phone call. For years, they lived with the impossible thought that maybe Emily was still somewhere. Maybe someone knew something. Maybe tomorrow would bring her home. Then came the day when tomorrow finally arrived. But it brought the truth instead. Investigators met with the Carter family privately before any public announcement. They sat across from them in a room where every word had to be chosen carefully. Because there is no easy way to tell someone that the person they have searched for is gone. Even after 20 years. Even after all the waiting. The pain does not become smaller. It simply becomes older. Emily's mother held a photograph during that meeting. The same photograph that had appeared on missing posters across Texas. The same smile that strangers had seen for years. 17 years old. Full of plans. Full of a future that never happened. She deserved to come home, her mother said. And that sentence stayed with investigators long after they left. Because that was the purpose of everything. Not just solving a case. Not just proving a suspect. Bringing someone home. Even if home was not what anyone wanted it to be. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. A confession was powerful. DNA was powerful. But prosecutors needed more. They needed every detail. Every timeline. Every piece of evidence. Because 20 years had passed. And every defense attorney knew the same thing. Time creates questions. Memories fade. Evidence disappears. The past becomes harder to prove. Investigators rebuilt the night of August 14, 1998. Minute by minute. Second by second. 11:32 p.m. Emily leaves her friend's house. The last confirmed moment when the world still knew exactly where she was. 11:47 p.m. Her vehicle appears on the gas station camera. Alone. Moving toward home. 11:53 p.m. The final destination. Maple Creek Road. Then the gap. The 6 minutes that had haunted everyone for 20 years. Now they had an explanation. Not a comforting one. Not a simple one. But an explanation. Hargrove's confession filled in the darkness between those timestamps. He had seen her arrive. He had approached her. He had created the moment that changed everything. And afterward, he had spent 20 years pretending nothing happened. That detail disturbed investigators more than almost anything else. Not just the crime. The normal life that followed. The ordinary mornings. The casual conversations. The ability to walk past the Carter family's home. Knowing. Always knowing. Neighbors struggled to process it. Many described the same feeling.
Shock.
Then disbelief. Then memories returning. Because after an arrest, people search the past. They look for signs. Warnings.
Clues they missed.
One neighbor remembered Hargrove standing outside late at night. Another remembered him watching cars pass. Someone else remembered that he always seemed interested in neighborhood routines. Who came home? Who left? When lights turned off. Small things. Almost meaningless. Until they weren't. That was the terrifying part. The signs were never obvious. They were ordinary. And ordinary things are the easiest to ignore. The property where Emily's remains were discovered became the center of the final investigation. Forensic teams continued their work carefully. The passage of time had damaged evidence. Nature had changed the area. Human development had covered parts of the original landscape. But science had caught up. Technology had given investigators a second chance. Experts examined every fragment recovered. Every trace. Every object. Nothing was rushed. Because Emily Carter's final moments deserved accuracy. Not assumptions. Not guesses.
Truth.
The confirmation came weeks later. The remains belonged to Emily. The girl who disappeared in 1998. The daughter. The friend. The teenager whose face had remained on posters long after people stopped expecting answers. The announcement was brief. Professional. Careful. But everyone understood the meaning. The search was over. Across the town, people reacted differently. Some felt anger. Some felt sadness. Some felt relief that the mystery had finally ended. Others struggled with a darker realization. That someone among them had known the truth all along. Maple Creek Road changed after that. Not physically. The houses remained. The streets remained. The same trees stood along the sidewalks. But the feeling was different. Because places remember. People attach stories to locations. A driveway was no longer just a driveway. A house was no longer just a house. A street corner became a reminder. The Carter family finally had the answer. But they also had a new kind of grief. The grief of knowing. There is a difference between wondering what happened and knowing exactly what happened. The imagination creates endless possibilities. The truth creates one. Years of searching had ended. But the emotional aftermath had just begun. For investigators, the case became an example of something they already knew. Cold cases are not always forgotten. Sometimes they are simply waiting. Waiting for technology. Waiting for patience. Waiting for one overlooked piece to finally become important. In 1998, DNA could not tell them who stood near Emily's car. In 2018, it could. A tiny trace. Something invisible. Something everyone walked past. Something that survived when memories failed. The case that once seemed impossible had been solved by the smallest evidence. Not a dramatic discovery. Not a witness suddenly appearing. Not a confession made out of guilt. A scientific connection. A silent message left behind. But one question remained. How many times had Hargrove driven past the Carter house? How many times had he seen the place where everything changed? How many times had he lived an ordinary life while carrying an extraordinary secret? Nobody would ever know, because some answers disappear with the person who holds them. What remained was the truth. Emily Carter had not vanished into the unknown. She had not been lost forever. Her story had not ended in mystery. It had ended in discovery. 20 years of silence. 20 years of unanswered questions. 20 years of a community searching for something that was closer than anyone imagined. And in the end, the breakthrough did not come from a stranger. It came from the quietest person in the neighborhood. The person everyone overlooked. The person who blended into the background. A neighbor. The kind of person people pass every day without a second thought. The kind of person who can disappear into ordinary life. Until one day, the truth finds him. And when it does, no amount of silence can bury it again. Title: Texas 1998 Cold Case Solved. DNA Breakthrough Exposes Quiet Neighbor. The town thought the hardest part was finding the truth. They were wrong. Because sometimes the moment a mystery is solved is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of understanding what was lost. For 20 years, Emily Carter existed as a question. A photograph on a wall. A name on a missing person report. A face printed on old flyers that slowly faded under sunlight. A daughter whose family lived every day suspended between hope and heartbreak. Now, the question had an answer. But answers carry their own kind of pain. After Daniel Hargrove's arrest, the investigation entered a different phase. The urgency changed. The search became reconstruction. Not where was Emily? They knew. Now, the question was, how did everyone miss it for so long? Investigators returned once again to the original case file. The same pages that had been opened thousands of times. The same photographs. The same witness statements. The same timeline that had haunted detectives for decades. But now they saw everything differently. Because evidence changes when you know the ending. A detail that once seemed meaningless becomes impossible to ignore. A sentence that once sounded normal suddenly feels different. The first thing investigators examined was Hargrove himself. Not just the crime. The person. Because understanding how someone could hide a secret for 20 years was part of understanding the case. Neighbors described him almost the same way. Quiet. Private. Predictable. He wasn't the person people expected to fear. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't openly threatening. He didn't create problems. He created no reason for anyone to look closer. And that became one of the most unsettling parts of the investigation. The danger was not hidden behind obvious warning signs. It was hidden behind normal behavior. For years, the community had searched for a stranger. Someone passing through. Someone unknown. Someone who came from outside and disappeared afterward. But the reality was much closer. The person responsible had never needed to enter the neighborhood. He was already there. That realization changed the way residents looked at their own memories. People began replaying old moments. Conversations. Encounters. Small interactions that seemed meaningless at the time. Now, every memory carried a question. Was there something they missed? Something they should have noticed? But investigators understood something important. Hindsight creates patterns that were impossible to see before. Not every quiet person is dangerous. Not every unusual habit is a warning sign. The tragedy was not that everyone ignored obvious evidence. The tragedy was that the evidence was almost invisible. Until science revealed it. The DNA breakthrough became the center of the case. Experts explained how a tiny biological trace could survive decades. a microscopic piece of information left behind in a moment no one thought would matter. In 1998, it was just evidence. Unusable.
Silent.
Waiting. 20 years later, technology gave it a voice. And that voice pointed directly back to Maple Creek Road. The investigation also uncovered more details about Hargrove's life after Emily disappeared. And those details created a disturbing picture. Because nothing changed. That was what shocked investigators most.
No sudden escape. No disappearance.
No attempt to start over.
He stayed. Worked.
Paid bills. Lived normally. He attended neighborhood events. He spoke casually with people who had spent years searching for Emily. He existed in the same community where her family continued hoping for answers. The ability to continue living normally after something like that became one of the most haunting aspects of the case. Not because it explained him, but because it showed how completely he had separated the crime from his everyday life. Meanwhile, prosecutors prepared their case. A 20-year-old cold case requires patience. Evidence from decades ago must survive intense examination. Every piece must withstand questions. Every conclusion must be supported. Because a conviction cannot be built on emotion. Only facts. The prosecution's evidence was powerful. DNA linking Hargrove to the scene. Emily's belongings recovered from his home. The discovery location. His own statements. And the timeline that placed him exactly where he had denied being involved. The defense attempted to challenge pieces of the case. They questioned memory. They questioned the passage of time. They questioned interpretation. But some things cannot be explained away. DNA does not forget. Evidence does not lose its meaning because years pass. The courtroom became the final stage of a story that had begun in darkness. Families filled the seats. Reporters waited outside. The community watched. Because this was no longer just a missing person case. It was a story everyone had carried. When Emily's name was spoken inside that courtroom, it was not as a mystery. Not as a case number. Not as a photograph. She was a person. A teenager. A daughter. A friend. A life interrupted. The prosecution described the night she disappeared. The driveway. The car. The silence. The distance between where she parked and where she was supposed to enter her home. 30 feet. 30 feet that separated an ordinary night from a 20-year nightmare. The evidence showed how close the answer had always been. Not miles away. Not hidden in another state. Not buried in a stranger's secret. Right there. In the neighborhood. The courtroom listened as the timeline was rebuilt. The moment Emily arrived. The moment Hargrove approached. The moment everything changed. For Emily's family, hearing those details was painful. But it was also final. For years, they had imagined countless possibilities. Now, they had one truth. A terrible truth. But truth. When the verdict finally came, there was no celebration. No sense of victory. Only a quiet recognition. Justice had arrived late. But it had arrived. Outside the courthouse, cameras captured the faces of people who had waited years for this moment. Some cried. Some stood silently. Some simply looked exhausted. Because solving a cold case does not erase the years before it. It only stops the waiting. Maple Creek Road slowly became something else. Not a place defined only by tragedy. A reminder of something more complicated. A reminder that forgotten cases can still be solved. That families who lose someone are not always forgotten. That evidence can survive. That time does not always win. The Carter case became a lesson repeated by investigators across the country. Cold cases are not dead cases. They are unfinished stories. Every year, thousands of investigations remain unresolved. Files sit untouched. Evidence waits in storage. Families wait for answers. And somewhere inside those forgotten details may be the one piece that changes everything. For Emily Carter, that piece was DNA. A breakthrough too late to save her, but strong enough to reveal what happened. The final chapter of her story was not written in 1998. It was written decades later. In a laboratory. In a courtroom. In the moment science connected the past to the present. And perhaps the most unsettling truth of all was this. The person everyone was searching for had never truly disappeared. He lived openly.
Quietly.
Among the same people who were looking for answers. A neighbor. A familiar face. A person who became part of the background. Until one small piece of evidence forced him into the center of the story. 20 years of silence ended with something microscopic. A trace. A match. A truth that had waited patiently beneath the surface. Because no matter how much time passes, no matter how carefully someone hides, the past has a way of returning. And when it does not knock. It does not warn. It simply arrives, bringing with it every unanswered question, every forgotten clue, every moment someone thought was gone forever. And for Emily Carter, the world finally knew what happened on that quiet Texas night. The mystery was gone. The silence was broken. And the story that began with a disappearance finally had an ending. The ending of a cold case is never truly an ending. For investigators, it is a file closed. For a courtroom, it is a verdict. For the public, it is a headline that eventually fades. But for the people who lived through it, the story continues. Because some crimes do not disappear when the suspect is found. They simply change shape. The mystery becomes memory. The search becomes grief. And the unanswered questions become the things people carry forever. Months after Daniel Hargrove's arrest, Maple Creek Road was quieter than it had ever been. Not because people had forgotten. Because everyone remembered. The street where neighbors once exchanged casual greetings now carried a different atmosphere. People slowed down when they drove past. They looked toward the Carter house. They looked toward Hargrove's former home. And they thought about the same thing. How could something so terrible happen in a place that looked so ordinary? That question became the center of conversations throughout the town. Not just who did it,
but how.
How did someone disappear from a driveway without anyone noticing? How did a suspect live among everyone for 20 years? How did a case that seemed impossible finally break open because of a piece of evidence smaller than a grain of dust? The answer was not one single mistake. It was a combination of time, technology, and human assumptions. In 1998, investigators worked with what they had. Limited surveillance. Limited forensic tools. Limited databases. They searched. They questioned. They followed every lead available. But the evidence they needed had not yet become useful. That was the strange reality of cold cases. Sometimes the truth is not missing. Sometimes it is simply waiting for the world to catch up. The DNA evidence changed everything. Before DNA, Hargrove was only a possibility. A neighbor. A person of interest. Someone who had been interviewed and released. But science transformed uncertainty into fact. The smallest biological trace became stronger than memories. Stronger than assumptions. Stronger than 20 years of silence. Investigators later explained that this was why old evidence mattered. Because evidence does not age the way people do. Witnesses forget. Stories change. Details disappear. But DNA remains. A silent record of a moment that once happened. For Emily Carter's family, that evidence represented something complicated. It brought justice. But it also reopened pain. Because every discovery forced them to revisit the worst night of their lives. The night their daughter walked toward a front door she never reached. Her family had spent years searching. They followed false leads. They answered endless phone calls. They kept hope alive long after others quietly stopped believing. They had imagined every possible ending. A rescue. A reunion. A miracle. They never imagined the truth would be so close. The hardest part was knowing that Emily's final moments happened near people she knew.
Near homes where lights were on.
Near neighbors who were sleeping just a few walls away. The distance between safety and danger had been impossibly small. After the case was solved, investigators revisited the original neighborhood interviews. They looked again at statements that had once seemed ordinary. One neighbor remembered seeing Hargrove outside more often than expected. Another remembered that he paid close attention to what happened on the street. Another recalled that he rarely talked about himself. None of these details proved anything at the time. But together, they painted a clearer picture. Not of a stranger. Of someone who understood the environment around him. Someone comfortable enough to remain invisible. That was one of the most unsettling lessons from the case. Danger does not always announce itself. Sometimes it appears ordinary. Sometimes it wears the face of someone familiar. Someone people pass every day. The trial became a final examination of everything that had happened. Prosecutors presented the timeline. The DNA. The recovered belongings. The confession. The location where Emily was found. Piece by piece, they rebuilt the night that had remained frozen for 2 decades. The defense attempted to create uncertainty. They questioned details. They questioned memory. They questioned the interpretation of events after so much time had passed. But the evidence was overwhelming. The past had finally caught up. When Emily's story was presented in court, she was no longer simply a missing person. She was remembered as a person. A teenager with friends. A daughter with plans. A young woman who should have had decades ahead of her. Her photographs appeared again. Not on missing posters this time. Not beneath the word missing. But as a reminder of who she was. Before the tragedy. Before the investigation. Before the headlines. That distinction mattered. Because cold cases often reduce victims to a single moment. The day they disappeared. The day they died. But Emily Carter was more than that. She was 17 years of memories. A lifetime that mattered. The verdict brought a measure of closure. But closure was never the right word for everyone. Because closure suggests something ends completely. And some things never do. Emily's family would always have questions. Things no investigation could answer. What was she thinking in those final minutes? Was she afraid? Did she know something was wrong? Did she ever realize what was happening? Those questions remain forever. Not because investigators failed. Because some moments belong only to the past. For Detective Reyes, the case became one of the most important investigations of his career. Not because it was famous. Not because it made headlines. But because it represented something every investigator hopes for. A chance to correct the silence. He often returned to the same idea. A cold case is not an abandoned case. It is a promise waiting to be fulfilled. The Carter investigation proved that time can slow justice, but it cannot always stop it. Technology changes. Methods improve. Old evidence gains new meaning. And sometimes the smallest forgotten detail becomes the key. The DNA breakthrough that exposed Hargrove was not dramatic when it was first discovered. It was invisible. Almost nothing. A trace left behind during a moment no one thought would matter. But that tiny trace carried a message across decades. A message that said, someone was there. Someone knew. Someone left something behind. And eventually, the truth found its way back. Years after the case was solved, people still remembered the same thing about Maple Creek Road. The street looked normal. That was what made it unforgettable. Because the most frightening stories are not always hidden in abandoned buildings or dark places. Sometimes they happen under familiar streetlights. In ordinary neighborhoods. Behind ordinary doors. The world often imagines criminals as outsiders. Unknown faces. People who do not belong. But this case showed something different. Sometimes the person at the center of the mystery is someone everyone already knows. Someone who says hello. Someone who blends in. Someone who becomes part of the scenery. Until one day, the scenery changes. The quiet neighbor becomes the headline. The forgotten file becomes the investigation everyone remembers. The cold case becomes the case that proves time does not erase the truth. Emily Carter's disappearance began with silence. A silent driveway. A silent neighborhood. A silent investigation that lasted years. But it ended differently. With science. With persistence. With answers. The silence that protected a secret for 20 years was finally broken. And what remained was not just a solved case. It was a reminder that behind every cold case is a person waiting to be remembered. A family waiting to know. And a truth waiting for the right moment to return. Because even after decades, even after everyone thinks the story is over, the smallest clue can still speak. And when it does, it can change everything.
La résolution d'un cold case, surtout après une béance de près de 4 décennies, ne se contente pas de clore un dossier administratif. Elle déclenche une onde de choc qui force la communauté à repenser sa propre histoire, son rapport à la mémoire et à la fragilité de la sécurité urbaine. Pour les habitants de Chicago, cette révélation agit comme un miroir déformant, renvoyant l'image d'une ville qui, sous ses airs de métropole moderne et en constante mutation, abritait en son sein, pendant des années, le secret d'un prédateur impuni. C'est un rappel brutal que les cicatrices du passé ne sont jamais totalement refermées, qu'elles sont seulement recouvertes par le vernis du quotidien, prêtes à se fissurer au moindre soubresaut de la vérité. Chaque citoyen, chaque voisin ayant croisé ce tueur sans le savoir, se retrouve soudainement lié à cette tragédie, devenant malgré lui un témoin passif d'une horreur dont il ignorait l'existence, une prise de conscience qui transforme la perception de la sécurité publique en une forme d'inquiétude diffuse, un sentiment que le danger n'est pas toujours là où on l'attend, mais souvent dissimulé derrière le masque de la normalité la plus banale. La complexité émotionnelle de ce dénouement est telle qu'elle dépasse largement le cadre du simple fait divers. Ce n'est plus seulement une affaire de meurtre, c'est une exploration des recoins les plus sombres de la psyché humaine, une plongée dans les mécanismes de survie d'une famille qui, pendant 38 ans, a dû naviguer dans les eaux troubles de l'incertitude. Comment se construit-on lorsque l'on attend un coup de téléphone qui ne viendra peut-être jamais, lorsque chaque visage dans la rue devient un suspect potentiel, lorsque chaque date anniversaire est un rappel que justice n'a pas été rendue? Cette interrogation résonne dans les foyers de Chicago, transformant le soulagement initial en une réflexion plus profonde sur le prix du silence, sur la nécessité vitale de la vérité, non seulement pour la paix de l'âme, mais pour la santé même du tissu social. La justice, dans ce contexte, n'est pas seulement une question de peine encourue par le coupable, c'est une question de reconnaissance de la souffrance endurée, une validation officielle que la vie perdue avait une importance. Que son absence a laissé un vide réel et que la communauté, à travers ses institutions, n'a pas renoncé à protéger les siens, même après que le temps a semblé avoir effacé les traces du criminel. Dans les bureaux de police, L'ambiance est une étrange mixture de triomphe professionnel et de mélancolie tenace. Les enquêteurs qui ont travaillé sur ce cold case, ceux qui ont pris la suite des premiers officiers de 1987, ressentent le poids de cette réussite comme un fardeau délesté, mais aussi comme le rappel constant de la fugacité de la justice. Ils sont les gardiens de cette mémoire, les artisans de cette résolution, et pour eux, chaque dossier classé est une petite victoire contre l'entropie et l'oubli. Ils savent mieux que quiconque que le diable se cache dans les détails, dans ces preuves insignifiantes conservées pendant des décennies, dans ces échantillons biologiques, qui ont survécu à l'humidité, à la chaleur, au déménagement des services d'archives, comme si le destin lui-même avait voulu préserver la possibilité d'une vérité éclatante. Ce triomphe de la technologie forensique, qui transforme une simple trace de salive ou une fibre de vêtement en une signature irréfutable, est le fer de lance d'une révolution dans la manière dont nous appréhendons la criminalité. Ce n'est plus l'intuition qui mène la danse, mais la précision mathématique et biologique, une forme de vérité froide, imparable, qui ne laisse aucune place à la rhétorique ou à la manipulation des avocats. Pourtant, cette victoire scientifique n'est pas sans poser des dilemmes éthiques et moraux. Le fait que le tueur ait pu mener une vie normale, s'insérer dans la société, avoir peut-être une famille, une carrière, tout en portant en lui le poids d'un crime atroce, est une idée qui terrifie. Elle suggère que la frontière entre le monstre et l'homme ordinaire est d'une porosité extrême, que l'apparence est un camouflage efficace, et que derrière chaque sourire bienveillant peut se cacher un abîme de noirceur insoupçonnée. C'est cette dualité qui alimente les cauchemars collectifs et qui donne au récit de cette affaire sa dimension presque shakespearienne. La famille de la victime, désormais confrontée à la réalité du coupable, se retrouve face à un vide émotionnel. Le monstre est humain, il est mort, et ils ne peuvent pas lui demander pourquoi. Cette question, ce simple mot, devient le centre de gravité autour duquel tourne toute leur existence, une demande de sens dans un monde qui, par définition, leur en a été privé pendant une éternité. La justice est servie, certes, mais la réponse à la question « Pourquoi moi ?», pourquoi lui reste une interrogation suspendue dans le vide, une énigme que même la science la plus avancée ne pourra jamais résoudre. La portée de cette affaire dépasse également Chicago pour devenir une étude de cas sur la persévérance. À une époque où le cycle de l'information est ultra rapide, où les nouvelles chassent les anciennes en quelques heures, voir un dossier vieux de 38 ans refaire surface et captiver à nouveau l'attention publique est un phénomène rare. Cela démontre que le besoin de justice est une pulsion profonde, une exigence fondamentale qui ne s'étiole pas avec les années. C'est le témoignage d'un contrat social non écrit. L'État doit à ses citoyens, à ses victimes, la recherche obstinée de la vérité, quels que soient les obstacles, les coûts ou les délais. Chaque fois qu'un cold case est résolu, c'est une pierre posée dans l'édifice de la confiance publique, un rappel que la loi n'est pas un concept abstrait, mais une réalité qui finit par rattraper ceux qui cherchent à se soustraire à ses règles, aussi longtemps qu'ils puissent se cacher. La résolution de ce crime est donc, en un sens, une fête de la démocratie, une célébration de la primauté du droit sur l'anarchie, de la lumière sur l'obscurité. Les journalistes, les auteurs de true crime, les podcasteurs, tous se ruent sur cette affaire comme sur une mine d'or narrative. Ils découpent, analysent, décortiquent chaque minute de la vie du tueur, chaque heure de l'enquête, transformant le drame en une série d'événements ordonnés, logiques, presque inévitables. Ils cherchent le motif, le déclencheur, le moment précis où l'homme a basculé dans l'irréparable. Ils nourrissent le besoin du public de comprendre, de rationaliser, de ranger ce chaos dans une boîte bien étiquetée. C'est là que réside le danger et la fascination, dans la tentation de transformer une vie tragiquement brisée en une œuvre de fiction, en un divertissement de salon. Mais derrière ces récits, il reste la réalité brute, celle d'une famille qui, encore aujourd'hui, doit vivre avec le souvenir du jour où tout a basculé, où l'innocence a été fauchée. Cette dissonance entre le spectacle médiatique et la réalité humaine est un aspect essentiel de notre rapport au crime non résolu. Il faut également évoquer le rôle du silence dans cette histoire. Le silence du tueur, bien sûr, mais aussi le silence d'éventuels témoins, la peur, le désintérêt, les oublis volontaires, autant de strates qui ont permis au criminel de poursuivre sa route pendant des décennies. Ce silence est une force active, une complicité indirecte qui a protégé le prédateur. En 1987, les mentalités étaient différentes, les moyens de communication étaient limités, et la méfiance envers les autorités dans certains quartiers pouvait constituer un rempart contre la coopération. C'est cet environnement, ce Chicago en mutation, cette société aux prises avec ses propres contradictions, qui a servi de décor à ce crime. Comprendre le cold case, c'est donc aussi comprendre le contexte social de l'époque, les tensions raciales, les inégalités économiques, l'isolement de certains groupes, autant de facteurs qui ont pu influencer le cours de l'enquête et retarder la justice. Le succès actuel n'est pas le fruit d'un simple progrès technique, c'est aussi la synthèse d'une société qui, avec le temps, a appris à regarder ses propres failles en face. La dimension technologique de cette résolution, si elle est cruciale, ne doit pas occulter la part humaine. C'est l'engagement de chercheurs, de généalogistes, de policiers, qui, armés de leurs logiciels et de leur patience, ont su naviguer dans l'immensité des données génétiques pour trouver le fil d'Ariane qui allait les conduire au tueur. C'est une forme de chasse moderne, où le terrain est composé de bases de données et de réseaux familiaux, où le pistage se fait à travers des arbres généalogiques reconstitués branche par branche. C'est un travail de fourmi, une discipline intellectuelle qui demande autant d'imagination que de rigueur scientifique. Cette nouvelle manière de faire la police est en train de transformer le monde de l'enquête criminelle, faisant des bases de données de généalogie publique un outil plus puissant que n'importe quel témoignage humain. C'est une évolution qui soulève des questions sur la vie privée, sur le consentement, sur les limites du pouvoir étatique, mais qui, dans le cadre de cette affaire, a offert la seule issue possible à une impasse que tout le monde croyait définitive. Finalement, la résolution de ce cold case à Chicago n'est pas une conclusion, c'est une transition. Une transition d'un état de deuil bloqué, figé, vers un état d'acceptation, certes douloureuse, mais dynamique. C'est le passage du pourquoi au voilà ce qui est arrivé. C'est une forme de clôture qui, tout en laissant des cicatrices, permet à la famille de reprendre le cours d'une existence qui avait été mise en pause, suspendue au-dessus d'un abîme de questions. Pour la ville, c'est l'occasion de regarder son histoire avec plus de lucidité, d'accepter que le mal existe, qu'il est capable de traverser les époques. Mais qu'il existe aussi une force, une volonté collective et scientifique, capable de le mettre en lumière, de le nommer, ainsi, de le neutraliser. C'est la victoire de la mémoire sur l'oubli, de la vérité sur le mensonge, de la justice sur l'impunité. C'est la preuve que, même après 38 ans, la vérité a le pouvoir de percer le silence, de secouer la terre, et de redonner, même tardivement, un peu de paix à ceux qui, malgré tout, n'ont jamais cessé de chercher. Cette affaire restera gravée dans les annales comme le rappel que personne n'est jamais vraiment invisible, que chaque action laisse une empreinte, et que, dans la course entre le prédateur et la justice, le temps, malgré son apparente lenteur, joue inlassablement en faveur de ceux qui persistent.
The sentencing hearing was set on a gray, rain-drenched afternoon that seemed to mirror the collective somberness of the entire town of Cedar Creek. As the judge prepared to deliver the final word, the heavy silence inside the courtroom was so absolute that the rhythmic, staccato ticking of the wall clock sounded like a countdown to an execution. The air was thick with a mixture of grief, vengeance, and a profound sense of exhaustion that had been accumulating for 28 years. Outside, the world continued its mundane march, but within these four walls, the history of a small town was finally reaching its point of crystallization. Mark Harrison sat at the defense table, a hollowed-out vessel of a man, his eyes fixed on the polished mahogany surface, as if the grain of the wood held the answers to why he had chosen to trade a lifetime of freedom for a moment of savage impulse. He looked nothing like the monster the community had spent decades imagining. He looked like a grandfather, a retiree, a man who had successfully blended into the background of middle-class existence for nearly 3 decades. Yet, the evidence laid out before the bench, the meticulous DNA profile, the recovered fragments of a life interrupted, the chilling specificity of his confession, created an impenetrable wall of guilt that no amount of legal maneuvering could scale. The prosecutor stood to make the final statement, their voice resonating with a gravity that demanded attention. It was not merely a summary of the facts, but a searing indictment of the cowardice required to commit such a crime and then persist in the charade of normalcy. The prosecutor spoke of Sarah Jenkins, not as a ghost, not as a case number, but as a 17-year-old girl with a future that had been stolen in the dark, pine-choked woods of Texas. Every word spoken was a hammer blow against the silence that Harrison had carefully maintained since the late 90s. As the prosecutor detailed the physical and psychological toll on the Jenkins family, the courtroom became a theater of raw, exposed nerves. The mother of the victim sat in the front row, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles were white, her eyes locked on the back of the killer's head, radiating a silent, burning demand for the only justice available, a lifetime of confinement. It was a moment of profound moral reckoning. The distance between the night of the crime and this moment in the courtroom felt like a bridge finally being crossed, yet the weight of the years in between hung heavy and oppressive, a reminder that time is an irreparable thief. When the judge finally began the sentencing, the atmosphere turned electric. The words "life imprisonment without the possibility of parole" echoed through the chamber, stripped of any ornamentation, delivered with the cold, unyielding authority of the law. There was no eruption of joy, no cheers of victory, and no sighs of relief that could truly wash away the tragedy. Instead, there was a collective, heavy exhale, a release of tension that had been held for so long that it had become part of the town's nervous system. Harrison didn't react. His face remained a mask of defeat, a blank slate where remorse might have been, but instead only resignation resided. As the bailiffs approached to lead him away, the gravity of the sentence seemed to settle onto his shoulders, bowing his head as if the true weight of his actions had only just begun to manifest. He was escorted out through a side door, a man being processed into the system that would define the remainder of his existence, leaving behind a courtroom that felt suddenly, jarringly empty. The doors clicked shut, the sound final, signaling the end of the legal process, but leaving the emotional aftermath raw and exposed for all to see. The aftermath of the sentencing left the gallery in a state of suspended animation. People remained in their seats, staring at the empty defense table as if trying to comprehend the sheer scale of what had occurred. This wasn't just a verdict. It was the formal acknowledgement that for 28 years, a secret had been living among them, growing in the dark, while they went about their daily lives, oblivious to the proximity of the shadow. The realization that they had been sharing a grocery line, a sidewalk, or a community event with the man who had destroyed the town's innocence was a psychic trauma that would not heal with a gavel strike. Conversations broke out in hushed, jagged tones as members of the community stepped out into the damp, gray afternoon air. They looked at their surroundings, the streets, the storefronts, the familiar horizons, with a newfound, piercing skepticism. The town that had once prided itself on being a safe haven now felt exposed, its boundaries violated by the knowledge that evil does not always come in the form of a stranger from the highway, but often hides in the reflection of a neighbor. In the days that followed, the local media circus began to pack up its tents, the satellite trucks departing and the reporters heading toward the next breaking story, leaving Cedar Creek to grapple with the debris of its own history. The town was forced to confront the legacy of the silence that had protected Harrison for so long. There was a pervasive, nagging question that lingered in the conversations at the local diners and at the kitchen tables. How could we not have known? This self-scrutiny was painful, a deep audit of their own perceptions and their failures to see the signs that might have been there all along. The resolution of the case, while objectively a triumph of forensic science, acted as a mirror, forcing every resident to confront their own role in the communal life that had allowed such a predator to remain hidden in plain sight. It was a humbling, almost shameful discovery, the realization that they had been part of a collective blindness. The townspeople began to look at one another differently, with a measured, guarded watchfulness that would replace the easy trust of the past. The Jenkins family, at the center of this hurricane, retreated into the quiet, seeking to navigate the difficult road of processing an ending that felt too late to be called closure. They had fought for this day for 3 decades, driven by a love that refused to fade and a determination that the state of Texas would not let this case drift into the annals of history. Standing in the lobby of the courthouse, they were figures of immense, quiet dignity, surrounded by a community that had finally come to terms with the reality of their suffering. The victory was, in the end, bittersweet. No sentence, no matter how severe, could return the years lost, the milestones missed, or the laughter that had been silenced in those pine woods in 1998. The court had provided the law, but the family was left to hold the remnants of a life that had been cut off before it could truly begin. This was the true, final cost of a case, the quiet, enduring ache of a family that had been defined by a question for so long and now had to learn how to exist with the devastating answer. As the weeks turned into months, the town of Cedar Creek slowly began to settle into a new reality. The case of Sarah Jenkins transitioned from a breaking news story to a chapter in the local history books, a cautionary tale that would be passed down to new generations. The police department, once haunted by the failure of the original investigation, took the closure as a mandate to overhaul their cold case protocols, ensuring that no lead would ever be ignored again and that every scrap of evidence would be treated with the gravity it deserved. The shadow of 1998 had been partially dispersed by the light of modern science, but the scars remained on the town's identity. The final act of the trial had been the sentencing, but the real aftermath was the transformation of the community itself. They had been forced to grow up, to shed the illusion of safety, and to accept that justice is not a natural occurrence, but a hard-won victory against the encroaching darkness. The quietude that returned to Cedar Creek felt different now. It was no longer the peaceful, naive silence of a town that believed it was safe, but a more sober, vigilant stillness. People were more present in their interactions, more aware of their surroundings, and perhaps more appreciative of the fragile connections that tied them together. The memory of Sarah Jenkins was no longer a ghost story, but a permanent, anchoring truth that reminded them of the value of their collective vigilance. The man who had been the author of their shared nightmare was now confined, his world reduced to the four walls of a cell, while the town, though changed forever, remained. They had endured the trauma, they had survived the revelation, and they had seen the system work its way to an inevitable, if overdue, end. The courtroom doors had closed, but the lesson remained. Truth has a way of asserting itself, eventually, inevitably, even after 28 years of waiting in the dark. The finality of the sentence was the period at the end of a long, terrifying sentence, and though the story of Sarah Jenkins would never be forgotten, the burden of the mystery was finally, mercifully, lifted from the heart of Cedar Creek, replaced by the somber, hard-earned wisdom that comes when the truth is finally laid bare. The years that have elapsed since the conviction of Mark Harrison have not erased the memory of the events of 1998, but they have fundamentally altered the way the town of Cedar Creek perceives itself. The story of Sarah Jenkins has transitioned from a jagged, open wound into a permanent, sobering monument in the collective consciousness of the community. It is no longer just a cold case that haunted the local police files. It has become a cornerstone of the town's identity, a constant, quiet reminder that the veil between a peaceful suburban existence and the darkest depths of human depravity is far thinner than anyone dared to believe. The woods where Sarah was taken, those sprawling pine barrens that once served as the backdrop for childhood play and local hiking, now hold a different, more solemn energy. They are no longer just a geographical feature. They are a site of memory, a place where the silence of the trees seems to hold the echoes of a tragedy that took nearly 3 decades to fully unravel. For those who live in Cedar Creek, the woods are a place of reflection, a space where the past and the present collide, reminding them that time is not merely a sequence of days, but a repository of truths that eventually force their way to the surface, regardless of how deeply they have been buried. This long, agonizing journey from the initial disappearance to the final, ironclad verdict of the courts has left an indelible imprint on every aspect of the town's social fabric. It is a cautionary narrative that is now passed down to the younger generations, not as a ghost story meant to frighten, but as a hard-learned lesson about the necessity of vigilance, the importance of scientific progress, and the unbreakable nature of the truth. The teenagers who walk the same paths Sarah walked in 1998 now do so with a different awareness, a maturity that was perhaps stolen from the youth of the previous generation. The feeling of safety, once an assumption that was woven into the very fabric of daily life in Texas, has been replaced by a more nuanced, realistic understanding of the world. It is a fragility that is now acknowledged, a collective wisdom that teaches that the absence of danger does not guarantee the presence of safety, and that the most dangerous threats are often the ones that wear the most familiar faces. The technological revolution that ultimately cracked the case remains a focal point for both local law enforcement and the residents who follow their work with a renewed sense of interest. The case of Sarah Jenkins has become a standard-bearer for the power of forensic genetic genealogy, a shining example of how the relentless, patient application of science can effectively challenge the impunity that long-term criminals rely upon. It has fundamentally changed the internal culture of the Cedar Creek Police Department, where cold case units are no longer the forgotten corners of the building, but the active, vital centers of the department's commitment to justice. Every file, every dusty box of evidence, and every lingering question mark is now viewed through the lens of possibility. The possibility that the truth is just one technological breakthrough, one updated database, or one persistent investigator away from being revealed. This shift in perspective is perhaps the most significant legacy of the Jenkins case. It has transformed the department from a place of reactive, stifled inquiry into a proactive bastion of truth-seeking. For the family of Sarah Jenkins, the passage of time has allowed for the quiet, difficult work of integration. They have moved from the stage of searching for answers to the stage of preserving a legacy. The agony of the missing years, the endless nights of wondering, and the crushing weight of the unknown have given way to a form of peace that is as durable as it is fragile. They stand as a testament to the endurance of the human spirit when faced with the most catastrophic of circumstances. Their struggle for justice was a singular, unwavering mission that spanned nearly 3 decades, and their ability to emerge from the trial with their dignity intact is a profound accomplishment. They have taught the community that even when the light seems to have been extinguished, the quest for the truth is a fire that, if nurtured, can eventually illuminate the darkest corners of a crime, providing the closure that, for so long, seemed like a distant, unreachable dream. Their story is the heart of the Cedar Creek experience, a living example of how profound loss can be transmuted, through sheer force of will, into a demand for accountability that refuses to be silenced by the passage of the years. As we look back at the trajectory of this case, it becomes clear that the man who sat in that courtroom, the man who lived a mundane existence as a warehouse manager while carrying the secret of a murder, represents the ultimate failure of a mask. Mark Harrison's life was a grand performance of insignificance, a carefully curated series of non-events designed to keep him invisible to the world. And yet, the very thing he relied upon, the banality of his existence, is precisely what makes his story so chilling. It forces us to confront the fact that evil does not always come in the form of a grand, dramatic villain. It often resides in the quiet, the unremarkable, and the neighborly. This revelation has fundamentally altered the community's relationships. The easy, uncritical trust of the 90s has been replaced by a more discerning, guarded approach to one another. It is not a shift toward paranoia, but toward a grounded, realistic assessment of the people we interact with in the public square. It is a lesson in the complexity of human character, reminding us that we can never truly know the internal world of another person, and that the social contracts we form are based on a fragile, mutual performance of normalcy. The resolution of the case has also had a profound impact on the broader culture of Texas crime investigation, serving as a landmark event in the legal history of the region. It has set a precedent, not just for the legal experts and the forensics teams, but for the public perception of what constitutes a closed case. It has shattered the notion that an absence of evidence is an absence of truth. By successfully navigating the complexities of genetic genealogy, the investigators showed that the past is never truly gone. It is simply waiting for the tools of the future to be applied to the fragments it has left behind. This has ignited a new era of optimism in the field of criminal justice, a belief that no crime is beyond the reach of the law if the commitment to justice is absolute. The Cedar Creek case is now a reference point in national discussions about how to handle the backlog of unsolved murders, a beacon of hope for thousands of families across the country who are still waiting for their own moments of truth. In the final assessment, the story of Sarah Jenkins is one of ultimate, albeit long-delayed, triumph. It is the victory of the light of truth over the shroud of darkness that had successfully obscured the facts for nearly 30 years. The case is closed, the files are archived, and the perpetrator is effectively removed from the world of the living, but the story continues to breathe in the town's narrative. It is a story of how a community can be fractured and then, through the hard, painful work of confronting reality, begin the slow process of reassembling itself. The shadow of 1998 will always be a part of Cedar Creek's topography, but it is no longer the defining feature. The defining feature is the resilience, the determination, and the unwavering belief that truth, however hidden or obscured, has a gravitational pull that will eventually force all things into the open. The case is a reminder that no matter how quiet the neighbor, how long the time has passed, or how deep the secrets are buried, the truth is a living force that will, when given the proper conditions, refuse to be silenced any longer. It is the end of the mystery, but it is also the beginning of an enduring, historical understanding that truth is the only foundation upon which a community can truly build a future. A future where the darkness of the past is not forgotten, but is instead used as a guide to ensure that the light of justice remains a constant, vigilant presence in the life of the town. The legacy of Sarah Jenkins is thus etched into the soil of Cedar Creek, a permanent, quiet, and profoundly powerful signal that the search for the truth, no matter how long it takes, is the most noble and necessary endeavor of all.